Okay, so here's our update on the broader markets. It's Friday night, August 12th. So we're going to start with the S&P. We'll review QQQ, the Nasdaq, and also which with QQQ, which is a Nasdaq, and IWM, which is a small caps. And so again, as I always say, take a look at the links in the description to get a sense of cycle analysis. Again, that will help. I'm gonna review this with the assumption that you've already looked through that and you know what that stuff means, right? So starting with the daily chart, we are on day 38 and we've made a new high. And there was a lot of posting on Twitter, for instance, about how this was like, look at this candle here. I'm gonna zoom in to make sure we can all see it. Like this candle here, which was the Thursday candle, looks incredibly bearish, right? It's a red shooter. This is the kind of thing that sets you up for a swing high, right? Like you're expecting a move below this low, right? On that next day, because that's what you're setting up for, right? Instead, we open here and then we just shoot higher. I mean, we didn't just shoot higher. If you look inside, like it certainly it took a little time to sort of bake, but eventually we just kind of moved higher. It was actually all green candles, like hourly candles on the futures at least, which obviously is correlated with the S&P cash, which is what this is. Either way, the point is we have a new high on day 38 of the daily cycle. That's pretty late, right? And if you want to look back, right, like if we just like zoom back to like some of the more bullish daily cycles, so we go back to here in like mid 2021, we have a high on day 39, a high on day 35, a high on day 45. So certainly we could see several more days of upside and another week even, right? Maybe another few weeks. There's no reason why any top has to be imminent. And I always say the timing bands don't mean anything per se, like in and of themselves. They're not like gospel. They're not like, there's nothing mystical there. We have to watch the price action and the market structure. That being said, at this point, at some point we're going to get stretched and we're going to expect a pullback because we've had higher lows, right? And at some point we're going to have to make a higher low. But day 38, clearly we just got above this cluster, right? So this cluster of price action here, this supply zone, we just got above that, back tested it with this bearish candle, and now we've moved higher. That's the daily time frame. And on the weekly, this is week 8. So again, we should be getting a daily cycle high at some point here. Again, it could come next week. It could come the week after that, right? But at some point, we're going to get a daily cycle decline. It'll be really important to see if we're able to hold a higher low for that daily cycle decline, especially on the weekly level. Like if you look at this weekly chart, right? Like ideally, we'd want to hold like the 40-80 level, or I should say zone, on any pullbacks on the weekly chart. Like you imagine we have another week where we go higher, right? Like we draw that out here, right? So like, let's say we even have another week we go higher, right? On any pullback, we want to at least hold that, right? And then maybe try to make a move higher. There's also the possibility we can kind of have a false breakdown below that, like, or even, this could even kind of extend a little bit. It's flexible. It's kind of loose. Most importantly, if you look at the monthly chart, we have a big, beautiful swing low on the monthly. So this is a new high, right? Once we went above the high on this candle, that 4140 level, we had a new high on the monthly chart. We're also above this high. And now next real move is going above here, which is 4300, 4307. So that's your next sort of area that's like a magnet. That's only 20 points higher from here. And then from there, it's that 4640 area. that's marked up by that line up there. And so here's where things get really interesting. It's entirely possible that we actually just had our long-term cycle low in June for the S&P in this case at month 27. We know we had a top on month 27, 2022, right? We had a big swing high, consolidation, big leg down, lower high, another leg down. Now the question is this another lower high and another leg down? Or is this the beginning of a new uptrend? Because on its face, this is technically a new uptrend on the monthly level too, right? Because we know we have an uptrend on the daily level, like we've seen that going back to the daily chart, right? High, then we kind of held this area, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. We're like stair stepping up on a daily chart, clearly. On the weekly chart, same thing, right? We had this cluster, right? But it was a higher low. This low, this like cluster of lows held above this low. Then we made a move up. Within this is one higher low, right? Like we held that. Now we've moved up. And most importantly, we've cleared this last lower high cluster, right? Because on the weekly chart, we had this huge downdraft, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 red weeks in a row. Just each week made a lower low, right? This week was lower, so this week was lower than this week, right? So that's one lower low. This week lower than that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 weeks of making lower lows. And then we finally bounced and made a lower high for just a couple weeks. And then we dumped again. And then we made a lower high again. And it's like, oh, wait, you see, like this is a lower high again, right? This high lower than this one. And so the presumption was we were going to take another bath like below this low. But we did not, right? That's why you can't predict things. There's no way to know what price action is going to do. You have to watch it and react. But if you can watch it on multiple time frames, you can get a jump on it. You can anticipate. But all you're really doing is reacting from one time frame to the next. You can't really predict anything per se. And so we had this cluster, this consolidation, and then we had the move up, right? And we've moved above this cluster of lows. And so you can imagine on this daily cycle pullback, as we're talking about, where we're going to get this daily cycle decline. We're on day 38. We're getting close to that daily cycle high. We would imagine we need to hold this kind of zone here on the weekly chart as we descend into the daily cycle low. And again, that monthly chart is looking really bullish, right? Because we now have new highs on the monthly. If this is the real area, I don't think we're going to get to 4,600 anytime soon, but could surprise me, right? But that would be this is your sort of next sort of zone of attack. But there's a lot of supply to chew through from between there and here. And so if you look at QQQ, really it's a very similar picture, just slightly different numbers. Also day 38, new high, very nice little uptrend on the daily chart, just like the S&P, as I said. And on the weekly, also week 8. And again, look at just this beautiful just advance. There's gonna be a pullback, right? That's how price works, right? In the same way that this just went down, it just went just lower, just massively, it bounced at some point. And at some point, if we're starting a new uptrend, we're still gonna need a lower high here. I mean, this was a lower high, or excuse me, we're still gonna need a higher low. This was to actually a higher low here, this little wick, which is why we could still go higher from here. But we're going to imagine we're going to get some kind of pullback, right? Something even if we do something like that, right? And then maybe like that, and then that, like that. So it's nothing works in a straight line. That's the sort of that's the probably the most important sort of facet of price action. And again, the Qs was the first actually to make this swing low, right? it actually closed July as a swing low, right? July closed above the high for June. And so we just have had massive follow through. I mean, look at this candle. Look at this thing, right? This thing already, this candle, July, right? The close of July already closed above the high for here. And then now in August, we're getting this massive follow through. Now, what we need to guard against, right? This is what a sort of major, like a sign that we're going to a new low would look like if we start to build a really big upper wick, like something like this, right, or something like that. Well, that's a really big wick that then turns red, and because there's a lot of month left, right? So there's a lot of trading to happen, so a lot could happen. So we could easily see this candle completely degrade, start to build an upper wick, and if it gets really bad, it could go completely red, right? So you just never know. But right now, incredibly bullish. That doesn't mean the bottom is in. It means that there's maybe some more proximate upside. We'll have to see if we can hold a higher low on that monthly time frame to really have an inkling of if, okay, maybe we had a early sort of bottom to a long-term cycle, like a really early 3-year cycle low. And finally, the IWM, same kind of idea, same count in terms of the sort of day count. So day 38, new high. And sometimes these things get out of sync, and then I find that sometimes they then sort of resync in terms of how they top, which will be interesting. I think that might be what we're sort of converging on. Not to say that Friday was a top, today was a top. It may not have been. And same kind of idea here. In this case, wait, is it? Yeah, I think this is week 8 as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so this is week 8 as well. And you look at the monthly candle on this thing, I mean, geez, like that is massive follow through. So this, like the S&P, did not close above the high for June, right? It closed as an inside month, but man, a nice big solid green month. And then we're now having massive follow through on the monthly for August. Again, this could end up pulling back. Like, look at this ugly candle. Like, again, this is like really incredibly important to understand, right? If you understand how candles form. At one point, this candle was just a bright green candle just like this one. I know that for a fact. How do I know that? Because of this upper wick, right? Because this is a red candle, it means it opened. I'll zoom in, just make sure that we are like, because this is a red candle, it means it opened here, right? And at some point, it moved higher and it was bright green, right? It was like, imagine a candle from here that starts here and then goes up here and is nice and bright green. And then it pulled back hard, right? And then once it went below this line where it opened, it became red. And then it closed here, right? And at some point it poked all the way down here. That's how candles form, and that's how you can tell. That's why that's really important to understand. That's alpha, right? Like understanding a candle that looks like this, that's really amazing, could turn out to end up like this when it closes. That's really incredibly important to understand. It means you have to approach things with a degree of caution. That's why you have to understand where you're setting your stops, what strategy you're taking. Are you using a trailing stop strategy instead? That's really, really important, because this looks incredibly bullish right now. But at this point, and this is different context, because this was also making new highs, to be fair. Right at this point, this was making new highs. In this case, we've had this massive decline. So very different context. But all the same, you have to understand how a candle can transform, especially when you're talking about a monthly candle where there's a lot of time that passes. So a lot can happen in that time frame. So at this point, the trend is clearly up, but we're also really late in a daily cycle. So we're going to get a daily cycle decline. And so how that daily cycle decline takes shape is going to tell us how durable a rally we have here on week 8 of the weekly cycle, which means next week is going to be week 9, Once we start to get into the double digits, then you're like, okay, wow, that's interesting. We maybe are going to get a right translated weekly cycle, which will be really interesting. So that's the landscape.